Podcast City Network.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 149 of the Nest Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, joined as always by my co-host, Zach. Zach, what's going on, my man?
What up?
Not much, man. It's been a wild weekend over at my house, I'll tell you. Hopefully everyone's weekend was a little bit better of mine. Mine, not so great. I started out Friday feeling pretty sick and went and got my COVID test because that's what every sign and symptom that I had seemed to point to was the fact, oh crap, I finally got it. I finally got the big COVID. So I went and bit the bullet and got the test, came back negative. Maybe I've just got some kind of seasonal cold or something, you know. Saturday night, I woke up in the middle of the night coughing up blood. That was enough of a sign for me to go and actually see a doctor and not just somebody at CVS that's going to stick a Q-tip up my nose. So I went to the doctor. Once again, they gave me the COVID test, negative. Did an x-ray on my lungs. Turns out I have pneumonia. So not a very good weekend for me. I spent most of the weekend laying around, not really doing too much, not really exerting myself physically. But my weekend wasn't anywhere near as bad as a guy named Christian Eriksen. Now, on our show, we talk about sports all the time. That's kind of our shtick. And soccer isn't a sport that we usually talk about that often. And it's even less frequent for it to be in our open. However, this has to be something that we talk about because Christian Eriksen from the Denmark national team was playing in a game Saturday morning and he collapsed on the field and he was pronounced dead at the site of the game. And this is being broadcast on live national TV. Millions of people around the world are watching this because this is the Euros. This is like a step down from the World Cup as far as the prestige of what this tournament is. And this guy collapses in midfield. They rush out. They're doing CPR. They bring out the paddles and clear. And they get him back to life somehow. And I was reading the reports about it that he's apparently in stable condition now in a hospital there in whatever country they were playing in. And, I thought to myself, if that guy can survive his ordeal and be ready to come back and play with his teammates, there's no way I can miss this podcast tonight. So pneumonia, all that stuff, put it aside. I'm here. We've got a great show lined up for everybody. And tonight we actually have a very special guest that's going to be joining us. It's I guess you could say it's a friend of the show because our good buddy and longtime listeners will remember Adam, the bearded Ballesta. He's been on several times talking to us and all that good stuff. And he actually introduced us to one of his friends named Austin Cox. And Austin just started his own podcast recently called Nontraditional Paths. And we want to let him come on and talk to us a little bit about what that's about. And he's going to also talk to us a little bit about what's going on in Major League Baseball. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome in the man himself, Mr. Austin Cox. Austin, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up, guys? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're loud and clear, bud. How's it going?
Sorry, I'm over here in New York, and I was supposed to be in another room out there, but it's Manhattan, and sometimes there's sirens and loud things going down the street. So last minute, I moved in here out of respect for your guys and your show. So thanks for taking me. I'm a couple minutes late.
Oh, no, that's fine. Absolutely appreciate that. But, if we did have some sirens and stuff like that in the background, it would just add to the element of danger that this show tends to bring. So either way, it would be fine. So like I said, Austin, you just started your own show not too long ago, Nontraditional Paths. Why don't you tell us and our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me and giving me this opportunity to share with it. So non-traditional paths is kind of a two pronged project. So one, it's the overall community of creating a community around the unconventional. And what I mean by this is it's often that you find people and you see people where they're at and you learn about where they came from. But there are a lot of untold stories of the intermittent middle steps, those journeys and those pathways of which people got to where they were. And there's a lot of value in that like kind of conjoined mix. And I'm trying to extrapolate a lot of that value because I think that there's a gap and a lot of things that are previously unsaid because they may not seem normal or they may seem like they should be hidden or pushed awayward. I want to bring that out. And so that's kind of the idea of just in general non-traditional paths. And then the non-traditional paths podcast is, kind of the voice arm of the community, if that makes sense. And so that just launched. And what I'm hoping to do is first kind of introduce myself as a host and who I am and like why I'm doing this. And I just dropped episode 1 yesterday, if you want to listen. And then after that, see where people react and how they kind of take it in and let it kind of grow organically in the direction that it should naturally. I have ideas and I have intended directions for it. My background coming from, the South, and then I was in the military, and then I was a small business owner, and then I was at an Ivy League university, and now I'm going to like a top MBA school. And within all these different, pathways, you meet people that each have their own versions of stories to tell. And so I can pull from each one of these places, but there's also a lot of other people that I don't know that likely have a great story to tell as well. And so it's really kind of to build that pot and then pull out the stories that really help people, change their lives. That's the goal, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And, like you alluded to, through your connections and through everything that you've done, you've met a lot of people. And one of those people that you met is Adam Ballesteros, who happens to be friends with us. And that's how we all got linked up. So those networkings and that connections has led to us being able to have you on and to talk about your show and to talk about what we like to talk about, which is sports. I also understand that you're an avid sports fan. Is that correct?
Yes, that is definitely. If you know me, that's in my blood. At this point, I would call it part of my identity. I know some people say that they're sports fans, and some people say that they're sports fanatics. I would say that sports is part of my lifeblood. So I don't really know how else to describe it other than that. There's probably like two tiers of things that are on that level. It's sports and like hunting for the best pizza in town, and those are kind of like in their own realm on like the top tier of my like made up pyramid of things that are important in my life. And so that's how I ended up connecting with people like you through Adam and through those coattails.
Well, we're glad you did. Zach, do you have any questions or anything you want to say about non-traditional paths?
So you were talking about you want to bring people's stories to light. Do you have any in mind that people might want to look out for?
Like as in a guest speaker? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like whatever you're gonna like. If you want to just kind of allude to whatever you might be having on here in the future, if you have a plan. Sure.
So I think what's going to be important is after kind of laying the framework of who I am and like who I am as a host, so that people can, one, if they don't know me, learn. And then two, if even if they do, trust that I would be the right choice for them to do this, because some of these stories, for lack of other words, may be inner circle type things, because you're friends with someone, or some of these things may be the first time that they ever become unearthed. And I think that it's important to lay the groundwork first and foremost that, I'm here because this is like important to me, but also because I'm here for you. And so the long-winded answer to your question would be yes, but not in a particular order yet, because I want to diversify the guest pool, because I don't want it to make it just military people that I know, or just people that I knew from New York or Columbia, or just people that I knew from Texas growing up, or professional or semi-professional athletes that pivoted at some point and are now doing something else because they believe in that more than what they were doing prior, right? And so there still needs to be direction, in which case trying to mix the guests out but there are some in the works, up to the prior Olympic athlete type, New York Times, Wall Street Journal type writers, like that's where they currently are, but they weren't there prior. And then the college that I went to at Columbia was a non-traditional school. And what that means was that in order to even qualify for it, you had to be at least a year removed from high school. So you had people like ballerinas, former lawyers, paralegals, international military. So it's naturally a lot of stories there. So that's pretty easy pretty easy talent to pull from, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That sounds riveting. I'm definitely excited to see what you have cooking, and I'll definitely be tuning in.
Oh, word. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Zach and I are both military. That's actually how we met, and that's where our friendship began. And we've continued that. Obviously, judging by all of our facial hair, none of us are enlisted anymore. But we've continued that friendship long since we've gotten out of the military, and that was the path that we took that kind of led us to being this show eventually. And talking about the show, one of the things that we clearly like to focus on is Major League Baseball. And I don't know if you're a baseball fan or if you have a specific team that you cheer for, Austin, but around here, I'm a Red Sox fan and Zach is a Cardinals fan. Do you have a team that you represent?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Houston, so,
Okay, so you like to bang on trash cans and all that good stuff. Good deal.
I mean, I've been banging on trash can long before there were scandals. I don't know why it took them so long, so...
Good to go. So you're at least familiar with the jokes and everything that's going on. And the Astros, they've actually been surging as of late there in the AL West. So that's good. We'll get into that. We're going to look into the MLB standings a little bit tonight and kind of give our thoughts on where everything's going now that we're getting up there in games. We're up there to 66 games for some teams and all that stuff. So we're right on track. We're almost to the All-Star game. We're going to talk a little bit about the All-Star voting and stuff like that. So that being said, let's take a look at the American League East starting off. The Tampa Bay Rays, they've been probably the hottest team in all of baseball for the past month or so, and they have surged out to a 3-game lead there in the AL East. It's definitely been helped by some of the other teams in the division hitting some skids. Boston Red Sox hit some skids against the Astros and against the Blue Jays here lately, and that's kind of knocked them out because they were hanging right with the Rays for a while. But man, can either of you see an answer for the Tampa Bay Rays right now?
Injury, honestly, might be the only thing. I mean, they're quite a hot team on both sides of the ball too. So yeah, they're definitely really clicking right now. So I feel bad for the AL East, other than the Rays, because man, it's going to be hard to try to keep up with them.
You got to get their starting pitching off the mound. I mean, you got someone like Tyler Glasnow, who is basically 6'25", and he throws 100. And what that really means at that extension level is that it's coming at you even faster than that. So, and he's not even sometimes their best pitcher. They have a couple other guys in their starting wheelhouse that really, if they get 6 or 7 out of them, it's going to be really tough to beat them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Their pitching has been phenomenal all season. They've only been scored on 244 times all season. I think that's the second lowest in the majors, which is phenomenal. That pitching staff has done an outstanding job. And it's funny, I was preparing for this episode and I was looking at all of the All-Star voting. Tampa Bay doesn't have a single offensive player that's voted in the All-Star game so far. So that's saying how dominant their pitching is that's been keeping them in these games, because their offensive guys, they're just run-of-the-mill, going out there, getting hits, doing everything, but they're not superstars. They don't have any of those big-name talents on the offensive side of the ball like a lot of these other teams do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Moving on to the AL Central, as predicted, the Chicago White Sox are starting to run away with things a little bit. They're up 5.5 games over the Cleveland Indians right now, and it doesn't seem like they're going to slow down anytime soon. We thought maybe that whole hiccup with La Russa and coming after his own players, Mercedes and their pitcher, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Nope, nobody else knows. Lance Lynn, that's the one.
Yep.
Coming after his own players that would have kind of sidelined them a little bit, but they keep winning. And I think part of that is because of that division being so weak, and they're the only good team in that division, so they get to beat up on everybody else. But man, they've got some talent there, and their pitching has been phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one thing I didn't really expect. I think obviously Lucas Giolito is a good pitcher, but I didn't really know too many of their other pitchers. And like you said, they've been very good. And I definitely expected them to have some bumpy roads ahead of that whole La Russa deal, but they've been able to figure it out. So yeah, I looked for them to clinch the division in a month or two. I mean, they're going to run away with it for sure. I think the Indians are a decent team, but they don't have enough talent on that team to keep up with the likes of the White Sox.
Yeah, the White Sox, right? Like they have a very balanced order, and from what I understand, a very young batting order as well, which is obviously like means that they're future proof, quote unquote. But the surprise with what y'all are alluding to is that team ERA is third lowest in the league. It's almost at 3 flat, which is actually, when you really think about that, really impressive in today's batting age. I think that the other part of that was kind of surprising for me for this division was how much the wheels fell off for the Twins after being so good the last couple of years, especially on the offensive side, and just, kind of doing enough on the pitching side to make sure. I mean, you want to talk about like a really fearsome lineup to face as an opposing pitching staff. And I mean, they're not even they're in 4th place in the division. So that is, for me, was one of the reasons why that the White Sox have just kind of run away, because there's not really a lot of other competition that was to be expected.
Yeah, that's a great point. We hardly ever talk about the Twins, and that was a team that knocked the Yankees out. So what happened there? I have no idea.
Yeah, the Twins were a team that set the Major League home run record a year ago, and this year they have not even eclipsed 300 runs scored yet. They're at 299 going into tonight, and they've allowed 349 runs. So, like you said, their pitching was doing just enough to get by, but if they're not scoring 400 runs, then they're going to lose a lot of ball games. And right now they've got a less than 1% chance of making the playoffs. Of course, that could change if they get on a hot streak and go and set the world on fire. But according to the projections right now, they are not going to make it. So it's interesting. The 4th place team in the American League East, the New York Yankees, still have a 27.8% chance of making the playoffs. So goes to show how poorly they've actually been playing this year. In the AL West, we talked about a little bit. The Houston Astros have been on quite a hot streak here lately. They've jumped up in the standings, but they're still 2 games out of first place from the Oakland Athletics, who won the division last year and look like they could be a dominant team yet again this year. How are they doing this, Austin?
In terms of the A's or the Astros?
The A's. How are the A's holding on to the lead? It seems like they are the quietest front place team in the entire major leagues.
That's kind of been their story over the last decade or so. They have quiet superstars like Matt Olson, who should be the front runner for his position for the All-Star League, and I don't think he's even in the top 3. You have a really balanced power hitting lineup that doesn't always hit for average, but usually has a high OPS, and they drive in runs. And then you generally also have a very balanced pitching staff in between the starting pitching and the relievers, and they can really, in this new, you pull starters sometimes after 4 innings, and you have 2 innings out of one guy, 2 innings out of another guy. And if you have a deep staff like they have over the last half decade or so, I mean, you can win a lot of games. And you were alluding to the Astros being streaky. The problem is that at the same time the Astros are streaky, the A's are streaky, and they're a really good road team. That's what a lot of people forget, that if you can win games on the road, then you usually make the playoffs.
Yeah, to your point, the Oakland A's are 18-9 on the road right now. So that's a definite advantage if you can play well on the road. A lot of teams have a losing record on the road. Look at the LA Angels, who are 15-16 on the road. They're just barely scraping, trying to be a 500 team when they're away from their home ballpark. Zach?
The A's are crazy. And like you said, they're the quietest first place team out there. And we all, I think baseball fans know Matt Chapman and Matt Olson. And then after it falls off after that, they just have talent, and it's plain and simple. I think the AL West is a little bit of an easy division, but they have to contend with the Astros, and they've been very good this year, and they're still on the top of that division. So hats off to them for being able to do it. And I think, and barring some kind of craziness, I think they will win the division again.
I agree. I think that where the AL West rests of if it's like an easy or difficult league to be in, because there's not really like a neutral league. You're either because there's so few leagues, right? They're either in a hard division or in an easy division because you got 3 in each league, right? And it kind of rests on the Angels' shoulders. And when you got people like Trout and Shohei Ohtani on your team, it's hard to say that the Angels are not a good team. I think that they're just underperforming a lot of times. And when I lived in California, I had a lot of Angels fans that were my friends, and that was just kind of their bread and butter. It was like, oh yeah, like we might be good this year, but we probably won't. And it's just kind of how it's always been, it seems at least. And but you want to talk about an exciting player to watch. I mean, modern day Babe Ruth-esque type of player, Shohei Ohtani. If we could do anything to get him in Houston, I'd probably chop off my left arm to do that.
I think most people are on that bandwagon this year as well. That was my pick to be the American League MVP, and he has not disappointed this year. It seems like every time I open up Twitter, I'm seeing another 420-foot home run that he's crushed, and another 5-6 inning outing where he's given up only 2 runs. So he's out there, he's balling on both sides of the plate, and like you said, Babe Ruth-esque. But I don't think Babe Ruth would survive in today's game. So it makes it all the more impressive that Shohei's able to do that.
The craziest thing about the Angels is that they do have that Babe Ruth type player and the greatest baseball player of our time, possibly, in Mike Trout, and they still have trouble. And clearly they're not in contention for the AL West. I don't know what's going to have to happen there. I think they need more weapons, but I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation there because clearly two players aren't going to be able to get you where you need to be as a team. But you would think if they're going to throw all this money at Mike Trout and they're going to have this dual threat player, then they would try to make it work for the rest of the team. And somehow they cannot get it done. And it's crazy to watch them have the best player in the league and one of the only guys in the last however many years to be able to pitch accurately and hit, and they can't do anything with it. It's crazy.
Pitch accurately at 100 miles an hour.
Right.
Yeah. Which is insane. CBS projections have the Angels as a 34.5% chance of making the playoffs, which is better than the Yankees at 27.8 and better than the Red Sox at 34.1%. So we'll see.
A wild card, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's what they would have to be because it's going to be a 2-team race down the stretch between the Astros and the A's, I think. Moving on to the National League, the Mets. If I would have told you that the Mets were going to be a first place team in the middle of June, would you have believed me? Probably not. But somehow, some way, the Mets have a 3-game lead over the Philadelphia Phillies and a 5-game lead over the Atlanta Braves, who we thought was going to be the juggernaut of this division. So what's going on in the NL East? Why have the Mets somehow gotten out to this great start and they're able to sustain it? Only scoring 219 runs this season, but they've only allowed 202.
Yeah.
It's one name, 4 syllables. Jacob deGrom.
But the craziest thing about that is that he never gets run support.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need any run support if your ERA is literally less than 1.
Yeah, so you go out there and put a big goose egg up there for 9 innings. I mean, what more can you possibly want?
I mean, Chris, Cole got the massive contract, right? Coming from the Astros to the Yankees, and then you constantly have, amazing pitchers that have like one-off years. What deGrom has been doing for the last 3+, maybe even 4 years, I haven't looked at that far back, compares probably to the best, Bob Wilson or Bob Gibson, like Greg Maddux, like Pedro Martinez runs, and Johan Santana whenever he was on his game. Like I would put him up there against all of them. And I know this, and it's people are comparing just this year, but if you look at the full streaks, it's absolutely incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, DeGrom has definitely put himself on a Hall of Fame trajectory with the run that he's been on, and he's been phenomenal. And I saw an interesting stat. I was trying to find it real quick, but I couldn't pull it up. But I think it's something to the effect of, on the season so far, DeGrom's only given up 4 runs, and he has 5 RBIs. Dude's a machine. He's, we talk about Shohei going out there and doing his thing. DeGrom's doing his thing too. And, he's had a bit of an injury stint this year, but he's came back better than ever. But Zach alluded to it. He doesn't really get run support on the season. I think he's got a pretty abysmal win-loss record, which I know win-loss doesn't really matter for a starting pitcher. It's ERA, strikeout, stuff like that. But, they don't really put up runs whenever he's on the mound. It's the other pitchers. He only pitches once every 5 games, but the other guys in that staff are doing their thing as well. So we talked about it before the season that they have a formidable rotation, and they're definitely living up to it, Zach.
No, yeah, absolutely. And that's a whole crazy scenario there in New York on the Mets side of things, because obviously they have one of the best pitchers to ever do it. They picked up Lindor. And I think if it wasn't for the Braves just absolutely blowing their whole season, however they're doing that, the Mets wouldn't be on the number 1 spot. I think they're lucky to be there. And if any of those other NL East teams could get their stuff together, it would be trouble for the Mets. But all things have kind of worked out in their favor. And those other teams, Phillies and the Braves, aren't doing enough to keep up with the Mets. And they kind of just have found themselves up on first place. But like you said, if you can't get your best pitcher run support and you lose games because you give up runs after he is pulled or whatever, and you can't get yourself runs, that's bad news for sure in the long term.
I agree. I think that the over under on total runs usually kind of tells a certain story. So the Mets are 7 games above 500, and they only have a run differential of 17 plus, which means that they win a lot of close games likely, or low scoring games. And then the Braves are 3 games under 500, and they've only had a run differential of -2, right? And there's some teams like the Yankees that have a run differential of -7, and they're a game above 500. So what that tells me is that the Braves lose close games and the Mets win them. And that can make, if you're that close in the division, that makes a world of a difference.
Yeah. And, while we're talking about the Braves, they've had a lot of injury woes this season. Like, I know Acuna's missed some time, Albies has missed some time, but their pitching has where it's been really impacted. And, they thought they were going to get Soraka back, but he had setbacks in his return. And it's just been one thing after another for the Braves all season long. And it seems that they really have lost their mojo from last season. Because, if you remember, they were 1 game away from going to the World Series. They had the Dodgers beat in the NLCS last year and then choked. And, story of Atlanta fans' whole fandom is choking in the big moments, but it is what it is. That's what they did. And here we are now, like you said, 3 games back from 500 and 5 games out of first place in the NL East. So it's a long road to crawl, but I still think that the Atlanta Braves could put together a nice little run in the latter half of the summer and could be in contention. And like Chris Wilson was saying, the Mets will find a way to mess it up somehow. With that 17 run differential, that's not really saying that they go out there and clobber a lot of people. So if the fortune starts to turn and they lose some of those close games, you could see some of these other guys start to crawl back.
Agreed. I think that the Braves have like the lineup to do it, and they have proven that they can put together streaks with Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna. I think that him and Tatis are some of the more like just fun players in general to watch if you like this like new era of baseball. I mean, just like pure like powerful, swift entertainment, right? But I mean, it's the Mets to lose at this point. They've built up quite the lead, but 5 games when you have over half of a season left, that's nothing.
Not much, yeah. it's funny. The projections still have the Atlanta Braves as a 17.5% chance of making the playoffs, and the Phillies, who are in second place, only 3 games out, are a 9.2% chance. So they're not really giving the Phillies as much of a chance as they are the Braves. But the Mets, for those who are keeping score at home, 78.7% chance of making the playoffs this year. Attaboy, Mets.
There you go.
Now, what is going on in the Central, Zach? You know, right now we've got the Cubs and the Brewers that are in a two-way tie at first place, both at 38 and 27. And somehow your Cardinals have dropped to 6 games back.
Well, that's what happens when you lose 8 of your last 10 or whatever ridiculous thing has happened. Injuries have absolutely destroyed this team, and they do not have enough support on the bench or in the minors or anything to make up for those starters being injured. That was number one for sure. And number two, the bats that you count on have not been showing up, especially with runners in scoring position. I mean, I said it maybe a week ago or so. The worst thing to happen to the Cardinals is to have runners in scoring position. They cannot make it happen. It doesn't matter what it is, who's up to bat. They can't do it, and it's awful. Obviously, they have some starting pitchers that are injured as well, most notably Jack Flaherty. You're not going to be able to replace Jack Flaherty with a call-up or some whoever. So it's just it's a bad time right now, and I think we might be able to come back. But some things are going to have to go our way pretty substantially. Yeah. It sucks. It sucks to watch. It's not fun. But you got to also kind of give credit where credit is due. I did not think that the Cubs would be doing as well as they are, and they've been absolutely killing it. Their bullpen, I don't remember the stats, but Vescursion and A-Rod were talking about their bullpen having one of the best ERAs since May or something like that. And I never would have expected that out of the Cubs. I thought that they were just going to be selling off pieces left and right, and
So did I.
And here they are playing extremely well.
Yeah, I thought the Cubs were definitely going to be sellers come deadline. I thought guys like Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo, those guys would be all on the move. I thought there was a slim chance that maybe Craig Kimbrell would be available at the trade deadline because he's had a stellar season as well. So it looks like the Cubs might not be sellers. They might be trying to retool to make a push because right now they're 55.9% chance of making the playoffs. The Brewers have a slight nod. They're at 71.6, and your Cardinals have dropped just down to a 5.2% chance, Zach.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
Yeah, make it for a pretty sucky summer in St. Louis there. Yeah. And makes it for the game that I'm going to in September not that impressive if the Cards are already out of it.
It seems when the Astros used to be in the NL Central, and it always seems like at some point in that division, there's 3 or 4 heads of teams that are vying for one of those 2 wild card spots because it almost never was the best overall record at the top of the division because the Cubs, the Cardinals, sometimes the Brewers, but often back then the Pirates were all just solid squads, 86 to 90 win teams, and they would just beat each other up constantly. And so it felt good when the Astros, moved out west to the AL and really stayed and just moved division or leagues. But that run differential stat for Milwaukee is actually mind blowing. They're 11 games over 500 and they have a plus 10 differential. And then the other part of the division that is pretty surprising, given how much everybody likes Wrigley and playing at Wrigley, the Chicago Cubs are 24-10 at home. And they are 3 games below 500 on the road. And I get that, home field advantage or whatever, but I've been to Wrigley many times because I was in the Navy and was in Chicago for 2 summers. And everyone likes going there and playing. There's like a certain buzz and a certain aura just about being in that old of a gem box stadium. And the fact that they're 24-10 at home is actually, regardless of the statistic, pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you bring up about them being on the road. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on going forward. If they can't win on the road, then it's going to be a challenge in the latter half of the season because they've already spent 34 games playing at home. That means in the back half of the season, they're going to be on the road a lot more. So there's still hope, Zach, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's still hope.
We haven't sounded the alarm yet. We're just, at the edge of our seats. Some stuff needs to change. And like I said, injuries, which you can't make up for really if you don't have positions available that are ready to come up from the minor leagues and fill those roles. So it is what it is. I'm still excited. I'm still enjoy watching Nolan and all that kind of stuff. He still brings it. So there's something to be interested in, maybe not excited, but I'm definitely still, watching and hoping, and we'll just see how it goes.
That Flaherty flash leg kick. Yeah, everybody's got to miss it until he gets back up there.
Yep.
Yeah, everybody likes old Jack. And in the NL West, we have a 3-team race where we only thought that there would be 2 viable teams out there. Somehow, some way, the Giants are still holding on to first place there in the NL West, but the Dodgers have been surging lately, in part because they got to play the Pirates for a couple series and got to beat up on them because, that's the NL Central's whipping boy, and the Dodgers went to Pittsburgh and beat up on them for a good time. But now the Dodgers they've moved up into second place, only 1 game back. Do you guys think that San Francisco's for real? Are they going to be able to be a competitive team for the duration of this season?
I think that is hard to answer because as much of a surprise as the Twins were at being a 400 team, that's how much of a surprise that the San Francisco Giants not only sit atop the division, but are above 600 team. Right. Yeah. Those are sometimes 2 different discussions. Right.
Yeah. They're 40-25 right now. They're insane.
And I know people talk about, and this is a player that I really enjoy watching because he brings that like classic aura, is Buster Posey. He just like plays that classic, I am a rock behind the plate. Oh, and then I can also hit 300 and give you maybe a 30 on a good year. And, I can literally coach any pitcher on how to just not mess up the game. And you just got to throw it to me, that kind of like field commander behind the plate. I mean, it's not a surprise to me that they're able to pull around with someone like that. Right. But still, you're talking about the Dodgers with nearly 100 run differential halfway through the year. And you're talking about the San Diego Padres, who has, a $300 million man in Machado. You have the probably who's going to be on the face of the league as soon as Mike Trout gets out, right, and Tatis, and in general, just a very upbeat team for the first time since Tony Gwynn was in a Padres uniform. So that is what's really surprising to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know going into the season, Zach and I did a preview of the NL West, and we talked about how it was pretty much going to be a 2-team race, and it wasn't even going to be much of a race because it would be the Dodgers and the Padres, but the Padres were probably going to be about 10 games behind the Dodgers, and that was going to be about it. Never in a million years did I see the San Francisco Giants leading the division for the majority of the first half of this season, and here we are, June 14th, and they're still a first-place team. Blows my mind. Mike Yastrzemski on that team, he's a spark plug. I love watching that kid play. I say kid, but he's 34 years old, so it's not really a kid anymore. But I love watching that dude play. He plays the way that all little leaguers grow up playing. As hard as you can, every out. The way that the game is supposed to be played, you gotta love it. And like you said, Buster Posey, I didn't think him coming back this year was going to make that big of an impact, but boy, did it. That's a guy who has completely changed the culture of that locker room.
And go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. Go ahead.
It's kind of a 2-part conversation for me. So yes, I mean, it's not a surprise because he's been there for so long. He's been doing it for so long. But before it was, Tim Lincecum and then people like that on the mound, right? But something to remember is that this is an odd year and not an even year, and therefore the Giants will not win the World Series because they won in 2010, 2012, and 2014, and all the other years the wheels on the bus fall off. So they may be doing fine. So all those other, like maybe they break the streak, right? But that was always when I lived out in San Diego. Even when the Giants were bad, people would come and they would flock to Petco Park to watch the Giants, and because they had just had a lot of fans over the previous decade when they were really good, and a lot of really loyal fans. So they're probably feeling really good about this, except for the fact that it's an odd year.
Yeah, I do remember that when I lived in San Diego as well, that the Giants and the Dodgers would always travel very well to Petco. And there was always a buzz in the air. Yep. So we've gone through the standings a little bit. So let's talk about the power rankings. Of course, we're going to bring up some of these same teams that we've already talked about. But as far as the power rankings go, how do you see them, Austin?
So I was looking through a couple different ones because people have, kind of their different, fillers for 3 through 5 range of teams.
Sure.
I think that anybody that says the Rays, the Dodgers, and then the White Sox are, 3 out of your 5 are they're 100% right. I think after that, it's going to be a mix between Giants, Padres, and then A's, Astros, and then maybe Cubs, right? That's where it kind of starts to, after the top 5, it kind of starts to fall off in between those teams that are at the high 500 range, where maybe they're on a 9-1 streak right now. Maybe we're not giving enough credit to the Brewers going 9-1 recently. Like, what does that mean for their future? But they're only plus 10 run differential, so they're probably not that good. Sorry, Brewers. So I think that Rays, Dodgers, White Sox, and then Giants and Padres deserve top 5. How you mix them, is probably Rays got to be number 1 in my book, and then probably I think I respect the Dodgers a lot, and so they've got to be number 2. But White Sox are really solid, and they could be number 2 for me as well.
Okay, so we're kind of in the same idea. Down at the bottom of the ticker, you'll see that we put our Nest official power rankings down there, and we've got the Tampa Bay Rays at 1, Chicago White Sox at 2, Dodgers 3, Giants 4, and Oakland A's coming in at 5. My 6th and 7th place teams, Astros. I've even considered moving the Blue Jays up. They're definitely in the top 10 now. They've been hot lately, and boy, Vladdy is a wagon. That dude can hit.
He rakes.
Yeah, absolutely, he does. So yeah, we kind of named off similar teams, the same teams, just in slightly different orders. But like you said, as long as you have that top 3 pretty much set, 4 and 5 are pretty interchangeable, and then there are a couple that are just right there on the fringe that there is no wrong answer. They're all right there. Next week, it'll change a little bit because that's the nature of the business, because one team could skid, one team could get hot, and boom, you got it flip-flopped. Like last week, I didn't even have the Dodgers in my top 5 because they were not on this current run that they're on. But because they're the Dodgers and because of their prestige behind them, I've got to put them in there. And in fact, I've got them ahead of the Giants, even though the Giants are ahead of them in the standings.
I'm glad that my top 3 agreed, and I didn't look like a fool coming onto your show.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
I think ultimately it's smart to put the Dodgers ahead of the Giants simply because the Giants are suspect, at least in my opinion anyway. The fact that they're doing as good as they are is mind-boggling. And I think we all expect the Dodgers to be doing this good, if not better. So it only makes sense that they fit right in there, and they've got all of the talent across the board, pitching, hitting, defense. They've got every base covered, pun intended. And
I
appreciate that.
This is what we expect from them. When you go out and pay Trevor Bauer as much as he did to pitch every 5 days, you expect that they've got all their T's crossed and I's dotted. And up until now, they were on this weird, I don't know if you'd want to call it a skid, but they weren't performing up to the standard that you would think the Dodgers would be playing. And they figured it out, or whatever has happened. So they've gotten back to that normal kicking everybody's butt type deal that we expect from that team. So I think for the rest of the season, watching the NL West battle for that first place is going to be crazy. And the crazier thing is we're looking at a scenario where 3 NL West teams could potentially make the playoffs. And
how wild is that?
It's insane. I never would have thought. Obviously, the Padres and the Dodgers are a no-brainer. But the fact that the Giants are in this conversation is crazy.
I think that the other surprise team that did not just worse than expected, but just completely, you're talking about a perennial like either in the wild card or like going to the championship series. The Rockies. I mean, they were like upper 80s, 90 wins teams the last couple of years with really solid hitting and timely pitching a lot of times, similar to probably an AL version of like the Twins, right? And they're below 500. I mean, I get that their division is hard. Like, I get that their division is hard, but I mean, look at that away record for a second. 5-27.
Yeah, that's abysmal.
Oh
everyone
God.
everyone talks about the Coors effect of playing in their stadium, and I think that probably does play a part in some of those lesser named players, that a ball in some other park would be a warning track out, and in Coors Field that gets them their home run. And I think for guys like Trevor Story, what's his future going to look like? Clearly, I don't think he's going to stick around in Colorado, but maybe he'll be like Nolan, and maybe he'll be able to figure out at a different ballpark. But maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to say. And are you going to take that risk as a ball club and give him money? I hope they do. He's a good player. I hope he finds a good place to play. But it's crazy to talk about that Rockies team. I mean, you're talking about a team who at one point had Arenado, Blackmon, Trevor Story. They had all the makings for a good team. And like you said, they do play in a difficult division. The NOS is probably one of the hardest. But
And someone under the name of DJ LeMahieu, right?
True. Yeah, I completely forgot about him.
I mean, think about that for a second, right?
They had the makings to be one of the best teams in all of MLB, and they never made it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Speaking of good players, though, we're coming up on the Midsummer Classic, the All-Star game, which, it was in the news earlier in the season when it was moved from Atlanta to Colorado to the Rockies Stadium there in Denver. Mile High Stadium. Pretty cool little fun fact about that is they have a row of purple seats that go around at the exact mile high mark in that stadium. So if you're sitting in the purple row, you're at a mile above sea level. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool thing that they have at that. What is it? Coors Field, I believe is what it's called. But the early voting has been released by MLB and the front runners have been announced. And I wanted to talk about some of these guys because some of them are a surprise. Some of them are to be expected, but in the American League for first base, they got Vlad Guerrero Jr., which I think everybody's on board with. Second base, Marcus Semien, also from the Toronto Blue Jays. And then third base and shortstop, Rafael Devers and Xander Bogaerts from the Boston Red Sox. I am beyond stoked that Xander is finally getting recognition over some punk named Carlos Correa, who isn't half the player that Xander Bogaerts is.
I don't know quite about that, but if he's having a good year, he's having a good year.
Well, if you check the stats for the past 4 years, Xander has been a better player all around, but Carlos Correa has gotten many more accolades than Xander has.
Yeah,
that's
fair.
I think that's what it is.
If you just go and look at stats alone, Xander blows them away. Xander has by and far been the best shortstop in the American League for the past 4 years. And 2 years ago, he was 6th in All-Star voting.
I think something similar could be said for a player like, if you look at first base, Matt Olson, who has better stats across the board than everyone except for Vladdy, and he's not even in the top 3. My boy Yuli, he's hitting 323, but the OPS, the hitting for power, the amount of RBIs, right? Matt Olson should be way ahead of someone who, if I could fill in Correa, there's Jose Abreu, right? Mr. Perennial, I think saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. In left field, they've got Byron Buxton from Minnesota. I think that's kind of a good pick there because Buxton's an outstanding player. Center field, surprise, surprise, they got Mike Trout. I don't think you're going to find anybody more hard-pressed to be plugged into an MLB All-Star lineup than somebody like Trout. Right field, they've got Aaron Judge, who recently had to miss a couple games because of another injury. I'm wondering if his run of injuries is going to keep him out of the All-Star game because right now he's kind of questionable. He's day-to-day. Aaron Boone says that he should be okay after their day off to come back to the lineup. But this is a guy that seems to be made of glass, and I don't know how much longer he can keep up with this routine. Catcher Salvador Perez for the Kansas City Royals has been having a phenomenal season. and they've got Shohei Ohtani as the DH right now. So how amazing would it be if he got to play DH and then also got to come in and maybe pitch the 7th or 8th inning or something like that? That would be pretty sweet.
For sure.
That'd be really cool. I think that the judge comments that would open up the door to one of your favorite teams, the Blue Jays, and a couple of their outfielders that are on that fringe of either maybe they were going to make it, right, but they probably wouldn't be starting. Maybe one of those Blue Jays, Grichuk or Hernandez gets in there in a starting lineup, which would be cool because it means that kind of the shift is happening, right? Because they've been good for a couple of years, but haven't really turned the corner.
Yeah, and Bo Bichette, we haven't really talked about him, but that's another one of those that's on the fringe of being a breakout superstar of the league. Over in the NL, surprise, you've got your normal cast of characters. Max Muncy at first base, Ozzie Albies from the Atlanta Braves at second, Chris Bryant, we talked about him earlier from the Cubs having an all-star type season. Thought that he might be trade bait come the deadline, but he's putting up an all-star caliber season. Fernando Tatis Jr. at short. And then a couple of surprises, Jesse Winker of the Reds and Nick Castellanos for left field and right field, respectively. The Reds have been coming out of nowhere, seemingly, and the Bash brothers, Winker and Castellanos, have been crushing the ball all season long. And then we got Ronald Acuna Jr. in center field and Buster Posey. We talked about him earlier as the catcher of the National League. So I think that so far so good. I think the fan voting is actually putting the best players out there this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that Xander made it speaks volumes to that because, of course, like you said, you screamed at everyone's computers that he was sixth.
Zach. He was sixth, and he was the best statistical shortstop that year.
Yeah, well,
blows my mind.
It's coming back now. So I guess the haters, doubters, whatever you want to call them, have nothing to say anymore. So that's definitely good. The NL side of things makes sense. I was kind of sad to not see Nolan up there, but Chris Bryant's having a good season, so you can't be too mad about it. I'm sure he's going to be on the team, but starters are the big deal, I guess.
I think for the National League side, the biggest question is shortstops after Tati, and you got second place is Baez, and he's hitting 230. Which means that leaves the door open for anyone that's having a good year, right? That's pretty much what that means. It doesn't matter how many home runs you hit or what your name is. If you're hitting 230, it kind of doesn't make sense for you to maybe be in the All-Star game that year. So I would be on the lookout for someone like a surprise guy to be behind Fernando Tatis in the shortstop position for the NL, which would be cool because that's historically loaded, especially on the AL side, as we've been alluded to with people like Lindor, right? And when it wasn't Correa starting, it was usually Lindor. And then so now that's like a little bit of a up in the air position, I'm interested to see what happens on the NL side.
Well, and that's what I've always been told was the fact that Xander's not good enough to be the starter of the All-Star game because of Francisco Lindor. Lindor's head and shoulders better, blah, blah, blah. So why is it that he's not even in the top 3 of the National League?
Yeah, it's wild. I haven't really been paying attention to what Lindor's been doing, but he must be having a down year.
He slumped to start the season, but I think he's turned it on a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. Obviously, you definitely give the nod to Tatis to get that starting spot on the All-Star game, but you would imagine that Lindor would be up in those 2-3 spots, and if Javi Baez is above him and he's batting 230, boy, that's wild.
That's saying something.
I think the two guys to watch out for are Trey Turner, who's hitting almost 300, and he's got double-digit homers, and then just a rock on defense, who is usually, if he gives you offensive production, that's a plus. Brandon Crawford on the Giants. So I would look out for one of those two guys to kind of sneak in there to fill out some of those spots behind Tatis.
Yeah, yep. Lindor right now is batting 220 with 6 bombs. Not very good.
I wouldn't imagine that going from the AL to the NL would be such a big change for him. I mean, it's not like,
that NL East, like, you have to face a murderer's row of pitchers every night out. Like, you're going up against guys like Scherzer, Strasburg, Max Fried, Who else? Aaron Nola. Yeah, you've got some guns there in the NL East that you have to go up against night in and night out. It's bound to mess you up, especially coming from the AL Central where there wasn't really anything to really worry about except for the Indians who was on his team.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think in the outfield in the NL as well, someone to look out for, and you're going to like this one, Tyler O'Neill on the Cards. Mm-hmm. He's having a sneaky, really solid year, especially statistically. And it's not that strong in terms of the big names outfielders on the NL side this year when people like Yelich is not having a solid season, and some of the other guys from the Pirates that usually are up there. So I would look out for O'Neill maybe to even sneak in there for a slot, which would be pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. He has a ton of pop in his bat. He's been hitting quite a few homers, and he has an outstanding glove, which a lot of people don't really realize just because a lot of people on the Cardinals have good gloves, so he just kind of gets overlooked. And I definitely agree. It's kind of crazy that Yelich isn't in that conversation. I think mostly because he's been injured and he's been out for the majority of this season. He's just now getting a string of games together where he's played every day, and he's doing well. But when you've missed so much time like he has, I don't think you can be considered, even though he is a very good player. But if you're not on the field, then you're.
And then Lorenzo Cain, Kyle Schwarber, they're not having good years, right? Like, so you have like 3 spots in the NL that usually are just like, all right, well, those are gone. They're not this year. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the NL All-Star voting is going to be interesting as it gets closer and closer to the deadline. But we named our episode tonight "A Complicated Fella," and that's because the drama between the Packers and Aaron Rodgers seems to have gotten a little bit more complicated over the weekend. Packers CEO Mark Murphy calls Aaron Rodgers a complicated fella when asked how the negotiations are going between the team and the MVP quarterback. Regardless of what you think about Rodgers in this whole situation, any form of name calling or insulting from the Packers brass is sure to be taken negatively from the Rodgers team. And I don't think Mark Murphy coming out and calling him a complicated fella is going to smooth over any details or make anything any better. I think that could have been handled much better from them and a much more politically correct statement. But if you're Aaron Rodgers, how do you take that?
I think that's completely telling as to what the Packers think. If you didn't take them drafting Jordan Love as a sign, then this is right in your face. They are pretty much done with him. I think they don't want to trade him and they don't want to let him go because they will never get anything worth Aaron Rodgers. But if he's not going to play ball and if he's not going to show up to the mandatory OTAs or the mini camp or whatever it was, then this is where they stand. You know, they're ready to cut ties with him. And if he's not going to pull his end of the bargain, then why should they? So I think this is their dirty laundry out in the open. And this is the Packers side of that, where they're kind of getting bitter because he signed a contract just as much as they did. And he doesn't want to play, then this is how it's going to be.
Well, and he's already forfeited $500,000 by not showing up.
Right.
And that was part of the contractual bonuses or payment plan or whatever, that he was supposed to show up and get a $500,000 stipend or whatever it was. So he's already forfeited that from not showing up. Next up is the mandatory mini camp. And if he doesn't show for that, then they really will start putting out these $90,000 a day fines and stuff like that. So it will be interesting to see how much money he's willing to lose to prove a point, or if they're going to call his bluff and make a trade.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how small market management treats a reigning NFL MVP and a high caliber player that had been at that level for many years and had voiced that he wanted help. And yeah, okay, they had Devontae Adams. Who else? Right? Name me one other player. Okay, Aaron Jones. Why was Aaron Jones good? Was Aaron Jones going to be that good on another team? I mean, they had a great offensive line and occasionally they had a good defense. So yeah, he's a complicated fella. because he's mad. Like this guy is fed up. You can draft Jordan Love, but it sounds like even when they did that, he wasn't mad about that. Like that, it's business to draft the quarterback at some point. Maybe not that high, but it's not like Jordan Love played that year. It's not like they were like, "Hey, Aaron, like, what's going on? We're gonna put in this guy because we're phasing you out." No, he went out there and he won an MVP award for Cheeseheads, right? Which is cool. It's not cool to call him a complicated fellow, though, right? It's not gonna. I don't foresee that helping anyone's case in this like headbutting battle, if that makes sense.
No, I agree completely. I don't think that this is going to go over very well. And, I've been trying to look at the landscape of the NFL to see like where they could even remotely trade him to. And the only two teams that even would remotely make sense would be the Denver Broncos and the Las Vegas Raiders. And if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm looking at both of those teams and I'm thinking, I definitely don't have a chance to win a Super Bowl in Las Vegas. Because let's face it, the Raiders defense is suspect. They're not going to be a playoff caliber team anytime soon. Rodgers wants to win now. The Broncos, yeah, maybe they could be in contention with Rodgers, but I still feel like they're pretty much moving into the same situation that you have in Green Bay, where you don't really have all the offensive tools that you want. Yeah, you've got Cortland Sutton. Yeah, you've got Jerry Jeudy. But aside from those two receivers, the running backs aren't really all that great. The defense is older and banged up, like coming off of last season. Their star defensive guy tore his Achilles. How's he going to be coming back this season? And it's just so many question marks. You would have to almost get a team like the Miami Dolphins to buy in and sell on Tua, a guy that they were so high on last year. Sell on him now for a few years of Aaron Rodgers when you could have an entire career's worth of Tua. And I don't know that anybody's going to sell on their young star quarterback for Aaron Rodgers. It's just the landscape does not look very good. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, I just kind of swallow my pride and go back to work.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because there's nowhere that would be able to take him that is competitive in terms of Super Bowl. If he wants to win now, he should stay with the Packers. I don't think he will, though. I think he's fed up with them, and he might just bite the bullet and say, you know what, I'll play for the Broncos or whoever, and just finish out the latter part of my career and try to make something happen. Maybe the Broncos would be willing to help him out, like they kind of did with Peyton Manning. I don't know, but I don't think he's going to end up in some sort of great team like Tom Brady kind of found himself in. So it's going to be a weird kind of back third or whatever you want to call it of Aaron Rodgers' career, because the Packers for the majority of his career have been competitive. They haven't made the Super Bowl, and I don't think that's his fault, but they haven't been a bad team with him at the reins. And I think if he does actually want to move on, then he's going to have to play for a quote unquote bad team, because none of these good teams need him, can afford him. So it's just not going to happen.
It'd be interesting to see if New Orleans got into that mix.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That would be the one team that I could see that could be a Super Bowl ready team with Aaron Rodgers. But I don't know if they have the capital to do anything. I don't know what their situation is, but that would be a spot that I could see him going to and be ready to win.
I was actually going to mention them. Another team I was going to mention was going to be the Colts.
But they just got Wentz.
Right. But so the Raiders have Derek Carr, Marcus Mariota, right? Like the Raiders have like a 4-horse team, and you try and tell me that John Gruden wouldn't want to bring in Aaron Rodgers. I think John Gruden's literal voice would be like Aaron Rodgers, and he would just like have like a volcano pop out of his head, and he would just be like, all right, like, let's do this. Like let's sell the team for Aaron Rodgers. I think that he would do it, right? But the problem with that division is even if you go on to a talented Raiders team, because you got Josh Jacobs, Henry Ruggs, and you have meat eaters on the defense, and they'd underperform, but I think they had a lot of injuries problems last year from what I saw. But when Derek Carr and people like that were healthy, they were doing pretty well. But the problem is you have the Kansas City Chiefs. You also have the Los Angeles Chargers, who we've learned that Justin Herbert is potentially the real deal, right? And he can really sling that thing down the field. And the Chargers definitely have a solid defense, right? But you made an interesting point. I think the Saints post Drew Brees would be looking for someone that would be like a real perennial guy that they could bring in for, 2 or 3 really solid years. Maybe they stay there for 4. That would be bonus, right? And that like post Drew Brees era in New Orleans, that they kind of lick their wounds.
Yeah, because I don't think Jameis Winston's the answer there, and I don't think Taysom Hill is the answer. So that would be an interesting team if they decided to get into the mix. I think they would be better suited to go after Deshaun Watson, if I'm being honest. But I guess that's why I'm not a NFL GM, and I'm just a talking head on a podcast.
I don't know when he's going to be available. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think Deshaun Watson is tainted meat right now.
He is tainted meat, but from everything that I'm seeing, all of his court cases and everything has been pushed back until February of 2022, which means that he would at least get to finish out the 2021 NFL season.
Is that what that means? I didn't know if that meant that he wasn't going to be eligible because teams were going to touch him.
NFL has not suspended him. He has had no official punishment. So as of right now, he's eligible to play in the NFL this season. The question is he going to play for the Houston Texans? Because he's openly said and made it apparent that he doesn't want to play for the Texans. The Texans canceled their OTAs and their mini camps and all that stuff, in part, I think, to kind of get rid of some of the distractions around all this stuff, because he wasn't going to show up anyway, and that was just going to put them back into the forefront of all of the conversation and all that stuff. So go ahead and cancel it, get out ahead of it, say, hey, no, we're canceling this, not because of him, but because of other things that we've got going on. Mini camp's coming up soon, so we'll see if he reports for that. But yeah, he's eligible to play this season. Whether or not he plays for the Texans, that's another story. But as far as everything that I've seen, he isn't going to face any kind of legal repercussions until at least February of 2022.
What a wild storyline it would be if he plays this year and then goes off to jail next year or something.
And that's the risk that a team would have to take if they were going to trade.
Right, for sure.
And going from prior Alabama college football fan, so I was not a Watson fan whenever he was in college, and then he came to my pro team and, for lack of other words, was running for his life constantly. Luckily had someone like DeAndre Hopkins to throw to, and everything stuck to his hands. And then when they got rid of him, it was like, all right, well, looks like he's just gonna be running for his life again, guys. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? So I felt for him and his experience there until now. And then, hopefully everything works out for the best for everyone. You never wish any bad on anybody. It just seems like a big mess.
Yeah, it definitely is a big mess. That's for sure. The non-traditional pathways that we all take that leads us to where we are, right?
There you go. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you coming on, Austin, and talking to us. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you on social media and where they can find your podcast and all that stuff.
So yeah, my name is Austin Cox. The website is, as the name sounds, just nontraditionalpaths.com. It has all the links on there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and soon to be Deezer and Google Podcasts. It's just Nontraditional Paths. On Twitter, it's Nontrad Paths. On Instagram, it's Nontraditional Paths. It's brand new and it's coming out. There will be a lot of different styles of updates very soon as things kind of get worked out in the mix. But if you stay ingrained, you'll find out more very soon.
Awesome. Yeah. I listened to the trailer episode that you put out, like the little 5-minute teaser or whatever, a week or so ago, and I was hooked right away. I'm stoked to listen to the first episode. You and I actually talked about it a little bit before you even got started, so I was already kind of on board with what you were talking about and what you were planning on doing. So I'm excited to see where you go with it, and I'm excited to see what happens with it. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty cool thing.
I hope so. And I'm just trying to make sure it kind of builds itself the right way. And that's why I don't have specific answers yet, because I think that the answers are going to kind of fill themselves in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm coughing my head off over here, guys, so I need to go to get some more water, but it's been a pleasure talking to you, Austin, and we appreciate everyone that's been listening. We will see you guys back here next week, hopefully, if my lungs will hold up, and I will be back here to talk more sports with you, Zach. We'll see you then. Peace.
Thanks, guys.